little background on me. This is my second year at Boise State. I'm in the Master's of Arts in Counseling program. So I do a lot of writing and also obviously being a counselor, you work a lot with people. So I thought this writing coach position would fit me well. Writing, working with people, kind of goes hand in hand. So that's why I'm here today.
For myself, I'm a Master's in Public Health, and also writing something that's been a really important and useful tool. It really has helped capitalize on a lot of what we're doing at the graduate level and really progress the field. So, been in coaching in a handful of different settings. My background is kind of in health and EMS, but writing has just been such a wonderful tool, something I'm really passionate about, helping people. And so, just why I stepped into the writing coach role. And we're both happy to be here today. I know graduate level writing can be a little bit of a bland subject, so we'll try to put as much light into this morning's presentation as possible. There's a lot of good information in here. We'll take questions at the end, but if anything comes up during the presentation, also feel free to raise your hand, let us know, and ask away.
Cool, yeah. Let me start, let's get go ahead here. Today's goals are just kind of to really differentiate what graduate level writing is compared to undergraduate level, maybe give you some tips on the process of writing it, and just kind of learning what to avoid, things like that, and kind of how the process goes. That's really good part of graduate level writing.
Yeah, and another side of that as well is the tips and just the process, things to avoid. One thing we're going to stress a lot is the importance of time. Writing does take a lot of time, scheduling that time, planning accordingly, especially at the graduate level, the amount of research and reading that's involved to create a writing product. Definitely worth putting some attention to make sure that is something you have the time to do. So, preparing for graduate level writing, a few things to consider. One of the primary things, as we're just mentioning, is creating a writing schedule. So, timing is everything. The schedule can look a lot of different ways depending on what works for you. And really something that I would recommend is try to find a time that's consistent in your schedule to block out for writing, for reading, for research. There is the concept of deep work that PhD and author by the name of Caden has presented. And deep work is essentially allowing yourself to schedule time that is consistent in your schedule and that allows you to, without distractions, get involved in whatever project you are working on. A quote that I'll share from that to demonstrate how important that deep work can be, and the reason I mention it here is, well, the key to developing a deep work habit is to move beyond good intentions and add routines and rituals to your working life, maintain, designed to minimize the amount of your limited willpower necessary to transition and maintain a state of unbroken concentration. So essentially, by scheduling periods of deep work, it takes less effort, it's less stress for you when it comes time to write. You don't need to put the extra effort in to schedule it. It's already there, and you can step into that deep work space without distractions. With that, avoiding procrastination is definitely something that's highly recommended. Life happens, you are going to be busy, and the more on top of it you can be, the better off it is going to go. It allows more time for feedback, it allows more time for revisions, and it's going to reduce the stress while we're trying to write either a quarter-long project or a semester-long project or just a couple-week paper. So, a few things that you will want to schedule time for specifically include research and research and research. Developing new content, so that is the actual writing process. That's the time that you're going to be spending, whether it's spitballing or getting your organizational chart, getting your outline, but that is writing, that's developing what you are sharing. And then revision and editing, those are slightly different from each other, but those are also things you're going to want to schedule time for, either just on your own or with somebody, whether that's a coach, a mentor, a peer. So all of it takes time, and scheduling time for each makes a big difference.
Yeah, so now we can move on to what the elements of graduate level writing are. A good starting point is to differentiate it from undergraduate writing. Undergraduate writing is kind of that classic idea. We've all been there. Professor assigns some chapters, go to lectures, and kind of reflect on everything you learned and just kind of regurgitate it back into a paper to show you understand it. It's written for a general audience of people, so anyone can pick it up and could read it. But at the graduate level, it's a lot different. You're oftentimes creating and answering unique questions about a certain topic. And then at the graduate level, instead of reflecting the commission, you are the expert. You're like acting as that expert, talking about that in your writing. And it's written for a more professional audience, and professors, maybe other researchers in the field. And the writing is done to contribute to the progress in that field of study. So your writing should be able to make an impact on what is currently being researched and studied. There is a couple similarities between the two, such as using academic sources, no grammar errors, academic formatting style, and properly citing your sources. So that's a good baseline to understand what graduate level writing will look like. As far as that, you're going to want to be able to stay on top of what the most recent research is. You know, maybe there's articles from the 80s that are totally outdated now, and it's really important to stay on that, more relevant stuff, and also seeing how it's perceived. Because, there may be research that's out there that's really modern, but, it has some bad control variables, so it didn't really have an effect on it over time. And obviously, while you're reading these, you're going to want to notice the grammar, maybe their syntax, their sources, how it's all structured out, because you can use that information to kind of structure how your writing is going to look like. And that can be a really nice, important resource for you. And it's also really important to record what you find, because you might find some articles maybe you lose and you don't save the link or whatnot, but recording what you find, and there's plenty of resources for that, like Rocket Book or Notebook, that'll help you kind of keep organized in that regard. And as I just mentioned, organization is going to be really important throughout this whole writing process.
Another quick thing to mention there, and what Caden was looking at is also the regular writing. A large part of that is when you understand the tone that's already present in the field, the needs that are being repeatedly mentioned, research that needs to be done still, that is really going to help set up yourself for success when you go to write, so your paper doesn't stand out from what's already published, what's already available. So it falls in line and helps the rest of the field.
100%. Couldn't have said it better. The elements of graduate writing, there's a lot of different things to keep in mind. You're going to be effectively framing, dissecting arguments. You're going to be discussing and reviewing scholarly literature in that process, present critical analysis, research, and your own scholarly insight from what you've learned. And you're going to be synthesizing a lot of different ideas, whether it be theories, models, or maybe course readings for all three of them. Typically, sometimes it'll be applying a specific lens or a theory to look at that argument or that thing you're discussing. And throughout this whole thing, you want to maintain a scholarly voice, and in the end, you'll have a fully revised and edited draft that fits all of these graduate level writing elements.
Right. So the academic writing process. So to get into what the process actually looks like, we have a little diagram up here. Underneath the red bar, you'll see the blue arrows go in both directions, and evaluating fit, the need, and the feasibility of your writing throughout the entire process is something that is going to be very beneficial, something you will revisit time and time again. So it's very similar to undergrad in some ways here, the writing process, considering the task and the assignment. So identify the topic. Once you have your task and assignment, identify your topic, which will help you develop the thesis and what argument you were trying to make about that topic. That's essentially what developing a thesis is, and then also recognizing and identifying what research supports the argument that you're trying to make on that topic. Research is going to be a huge part of what we're doing at the graduate level. It's what we're contributing to, and it's also what we're using to support a lot of our arguments. Sometimes you may be the primary researcher and you are developing or conducting new and novel research. A lot of times you also use secondary or tertiary research that helps support those findings, help support your argument. Those will also show some opposing viewpoints, but research is a huge part of what we're doing. So being in the middle is pretty appropriate. Draft, draft, draft. Be patient. At the bottom of the page, you'll see the quote, "Ego is the enemy." It really is. We're not necessarily here to because of ourselves. We're here to help progress the field that we're passionate about, that we're here to work in. And so it's not about us, it's about the field, it's about the work. And so when it comes to drafting, when it comes to edits, revisions, really stay humble. The edit and revision process is very beneficial. You don't have to take everything that somebody suggests, but navigating that with a little bit of humility and grace is highly recommended. So, evaluating the fit need, again, this could change as you're researching. You might have your thesis, you might know what argument you're trying to make on your topic, but then you get into the research and it turns out it's actually a different root cause than what you thought it was originally. So don't be afraid to pivot at that point. Make sure what you're doing is still feasible, it's still appropriate, and you can make changes at pretty much any point. So, and then the tip that's in small font there at the bottom, the writing process can and will look very different for everyone. So you're always free to experiment, find what works best for you and your needs, and that is applicable to each part of this process.
100%. And with research being such an important part of your graduate level writing, we thought we'd maybe give you a little step-by-step guide on maybe how the research process will look for you, or maybe how to find good research to support your arguments. The first step is, well, I guess coming up with the topic of research, and when you have that idea, you want to create a list of keywords that are related to that. So for me, being in counseling and focusing on addictions, I might want to look at adolescence and substance abuse. So those are some keywords I can use to search in for my research at the different databases here. Now that you have some keywords, you can go to all these different databases here. My favorite, personally, is the Albertsons Library. It connects you to so many other smaller databases and kind of links a lot of information for you, and they usually always have a copy of it. And if they don't, and we'll talk about this later, the library has interlibrary loans, so they can actually do that for you in just a couple of days. Google Scholar is also a really great one. It pulls in from a whole bunch of other sources, but it may be harder to contact access to the article. Science Direct and PubMed are also really good too. And it's good to utilize all of these because they might have articles that they didn't have in a different database or whatever. And as I mentioned, the BSU library has all these resources for you, and I think this picture really does a good job describing kind of what I call the funnel method. Maybe you start on Google, which would be the most basic of it, and find some information on Google that you can use to search on Google Scholar, and that can lead you to more deeper, more specialized databases. And this QR code right here will send you some how-to videos on maybe how to use some of the Albertsons Library resources. But yeah, it's going to be a really important part of your research. I spend most of my time in the library.
And one of the nicest things about being at a university with those resources is we do have free access. So there's so many wonderful resources through the Albertsons Library. We have free access to it. And there really is so much out there, and it's a unique opportunity to be able to access those without any paywalls. So there's a lot out there, and we're also happy to help you navigate that and figure out what databases might be appropriate for your particular study.
And now that we have kind of an idea and we've done some research in these databases here, now we can kind of think of some synonyms, maybe some similar concepts. Here's an example here for like pre-service teachers. You can do teacher candidates and teachers in training. And these might bring up articles discussing the same content, but maybe the authors use a different language to describe them. They can open up a whole new avenue of different research to find. And this is going to be really important for expanding or maybe even narrowing some of the research we're looking for. And then Boolean operators here, these are also going to be really important to expand or narrow whatever findings you're trying to look for. The word "and" will include all the words that you type in the search bar. So if I do adolescence and substance abuse, only articles will come up that discuss both of those topics. And we also have the "or" one, which will search for either of them. So in that same example, it might 12 articles for adolescence or it might 12 articles for substance abuse, which would be really important. Maybe find more research on the background of adolescence, and then also maybe some background on some substance abuse topics. The minus sign would be terms you don't want to include. So the example here, you want to look at exclusively pre-service teachers, and you don't want in-service. So you would do the minus sign and then the in-service. So then that would kind of lock into those results that are coming up. And the double quotation marks is going to search for exactly what you're typing in. And this will be really helpful when you know what you want to be searching for, and you can really find those exact type of articles. Find that really good one that's going to be good in research for you.
All right. So, continuing on the research topic, organizing and synthesizing your research. So you've identified your topic, you've identified the sources, you know what the abstracts are saying and what arguments they support. With that, what's the next step? How do you organize it? How do you make sense of that? finding the sources, we highly recommend keep track of those sources as you go. So organizing and or synthesizing as you go will save you a lot of time on the back end. It is very common with research, especially when you're going through databases, to get in a little bit of a rabbit hole and maybe find a golden nugget, that article that you needed, that is perfect, supports your argument, and then you'll never be able to find anything. So save the research as you go, and it will save you a lot of time on the back end. The difference between organizing and synthesizing that research, organizing is more a matter of keeping track of that information or that source and sort it multiple different ways, and you can briefly summarize that once it is sorted. Synthesizing takes a little bit of the next step, so it combines the research. You might be looking at 4 or 6 articles and have those links saved, but then you summarize what those are saying, and as a combination, what argument that those articles support. So it shows similarities and differences between sources. Sometimes it might include sources that are conflicting. So it helps you kind of delineate that and start thinking about how can I put this into my paper, how does it support the argument that I'm looking to use this for. Something that is, or could be very useful as well, is using a matrix. This can look a lot of different ways. Again, whatever works for you and your brain is what we recommend you do. The matrix that's shown here is a more complicated way, or one of the more complicated ways to keep track, but also save yourself a lot of time on the back end. So the horizontal columns are showing the sources. That would be the link itself, or if you are on top of it, the APA formatted citation for it. And then in the following rows, we have the research purpose or questions, the topic that it relates to, the methods that that research had used, context, participants, findings, and then additional ones. So there's a little bit more detail, which again takes a little bit more time up front, but then when you go to implement it into your paper, it might save you time on the back end. The biggest bonus is that you keep track of your sources. One that is closer to what I've used in the past is a little bit more simple. This has their themes, the major themes of whatever your writing topic is about. You're going to identify those themes, and then you can list the sources next. It helps because different arguments are going to support different parts of your paper. And so this helps you keep track of what sources are really arguing for what topic, and saves you time when you go to implement that into your paper. Oftentimes when you're writing, you might just be flowing, you know what that argument says, familiar with the research, but then when it comes time to cite it, you might be scrambling, trying to find the article. Do something like this, you can still do your flow where you're just writing, but then you can look at the topic and introduce it, save yourself that little bit of panic or that search through a lot of the sources you've seen. So, as far as the notes, I would generally just summarize the main points. So you don't necessarily need to go into the research methods unless that would be appropriate, but most of the time it's just the main points or arguments that source is demonstrating. And then a hyperlink is very useful in there just so you can easily access them. As far as citations go in research, I'm sure we're all familiar with undergrad. Citations are very important, both because we want to give credit to the researchers, the authors that have done the work before us, and for legal purposes, the university purposes, it helps contribute to the field of work. It helps to show that your arguments are also valid. So there's a lot of important reasons why citations are 100% necessary. Depending on your program, there might be a different standard. APA 7 is one of the more common ones, but you may also see MLA or Chicago 490. And Review Owl is a website with a lot of good and completely free resources that provide the requirements for each of those citation formats. One thing to note is there are a lot of citation generators out there. You may notice in your undergrad, they do not always produce a perfectly cited source. So always double check whether you're using Zotero or a web address-based citation that's majorly helpful. Keep a record of the sources, double check your citations, and yeah, they are important.
So we got our idea, we got our sources now, we got some citations form, and now science are drafting this paper we've been working on. And I think this quote right there, I guess not a quote, but this statement really summarizes all of it, moving from the initial to the detail. And then the initial, you might just have a mind map, it's kind of like the bubble chart maybe you used in high school or an undergraduate. You know, you have some key points, maybe some bullet points that you want to discuss. Moving to a more detailed version of that, you know, more topic sentences. Maybe you have some arguments, some themes you want to discuss. Adding insights and transitions between the themes you're discussing. It's basically just filling out this more template thing of the initial and making it more detailed in the full paper. And point of view is going to be a really important thing too when writing. The first person is really going to be good for things like, your own personal experiences, qualifying your opinion, or, your role in research. Those are the first person is really helpful for that. But the second person, it can be a trap that a lot of students fall into. It can really make your writing seem informal. And the use of you, readers, like, is this me? Is this you writing it? Is this some third party here? So it's really important to just be direct and specific so that the second person can get really muddled. But the most important thing of all of this is checking with your instructor and kind of the preferences and the requirements of the assignment, because in the end, we're all here to get the good grades, and that's the main goal. And at the graduate level, providing more insight into writing and not just reflecting what you've been learning. So have this kind of blanket over what everything else you're doing specifically. So, some drafting tips for you guys. If you feel stuck, refer back to the outline. The outline's there to help you kind of expand on your writing, so don't be afraid to look back. Writing fast and editing slow, I think this is a really important one. When you get in the zone, you're just writing all these ideas, and then you want to stay in that zone. You want to get as much ideas as you can on that paper, because you don't know when you're going to hit that brain fog, and you just can't write a single sentence each time. And editing slow, you really want to make sure that writing that you did is quality. You have grammatical errors, that everything makes sense, it's properly cited. So when you get in that zone, milk it as long as you can. And at any stage of drafting, feedback is always a good idea. Even if you don't even know what you're necessarily going to write about yet, getting a second brain on that is going to really help you figure out exactly what you want to write about, maybe give you some more insight you didn't have before, maybe lead you to a certain source or type of resource that you didn't know was available to you. In drafting, when you start to write this paper, is when collaboration is super important too. Because if you don't collaborate now, it might put off all this work until the very end, and it's too late. It's going to save you a lot of time getting that second set of eyes on it earlier, so then it's less editing and formatting everything right at the very end.
Definitely. With the collaboration as well, that's another awesome thing about being at the university at the undergraduate level, getting into the real world, you may or may not have people to collaborate with. So having peers, having advisors, having faculty, having writing coaches that you can collaborate with really is a unique and cool opportunity that's worth taking advantage of. So, kind of to wrap up with the writing process, revise and edits are often the last step, although it will be made for that. To break down the difference between revisions and edits, I think it's important to recognize revisions are generally going to be a little bit of a broader stroke. So it's something that's going to be a major content change, a structure change, or imaging earlier. You might find that when you get into research, the root cause or the root problem is actually different than what you originally thought. So revising is going to be a little bit of a bigger change. It's really helpful to do this early as well, but it's something that you're going to do throughout the whole process. So synthesizing, condensing, making it as concise as possible. It's our job when you're providing the background, for example, or supporting arguments. The people that might be reading your paper are not reading the 8 papers that you read and come up with to support the argument. So it's your job to kind of synthesize that information, be as concise as possible, and share what those data elements might be. In addition, so editing, it's a little more of a sentence level process. So these are more grammatical errors. This is maybe a little bit more of a minor reorganization and making sure that everything flows. Sometimes when you get into research or really data heavy writing, you might feel like you lose your voice or something get on your paper is going to be a good thing. Everybody's going to have a different point of view, and getting the feedback can be really helpful. Might show things you didn't think about, etc. Most of these are pretty intuitive, so I won't go into too much detail, but reading out loud, Google, or have somebody reading the draft to you, both are useful things. So you can read it out loud, make sure it flows, make sure it makes sense, there's no gaps anywhere that leave you being as a reader. Google Scholar or in Google Docs, you can have it read it back to you. So there's a lot of ways to get a kind of verbal representation of what you've written, just to make sure it flows and makes sense. And then also, how many time before drafting and editing. This is a super, super huge one. This is a great tool. What that looks like when you're going for a walk, eating a snack, doing a breathing exercise, exercising, whatever it is keeping that and revisiting can be super useful. Definitely get a little mind numbing, or you might just kind of might have blinders on when you kind of get into the zone and you're really far into your paper and you know what the research is saying. Those gears are turning, but you're not seeing it from an outside perspective. So taking some moments to step away and revisit is really, really helpful. It's also good for the stress and the mental health side of it. If you're, as Caden was saying, if you're writing 5 hours on end, it may or may not be the best quality. And it's going to feel pretty stressful if that's how you're trying to cram all your writing in. So, and then lastly, CS, the Graduate Student Success Center, everyone there is here for your success. That can look a lot of different ways for writing coaches, and there's a lot of different resources.
Even better, we're just right outside the hall here, so you already know where we are. How you guys love this. And so now that we've kind of discussed what graduate level writing looks like, here's just a couple tips of things to avoid. Figurative range, metaphors, similes, rhymes, things like that. Maybe in creative writing, that's going to be something that could be important for you when you're writing important specifications of research and things like that. It's not going to be too helpful. Talking about how the chemicals in the beaker, darken like the midnight sky. What does the midnight sky look like? Like, where is that exactness that they want in your research? Cliches and idioms, that's another one. I mean, they're cliches for a reason. They've been overdone, they're overused. You want to kind of stand out in that regard. You want your writing to fit in with the writing guidelines, but you want to stand out with how your writing is. Rhetorical questions. Your goal in the end is to be able to answer your questions. So reframing these as statements is going to be a lot more powerful and show you a lot more confidence in your writing. And then excessive quoting or block quotes, that's another thing that can be a sticky trap people get into. You got this whole beautiful text you synthesize and you got boom, big block of quotes. And it's your job as a graduate level student to be able to take that reading that you're quoting and be able to synthesize and paraphrase it in your own words, and that's going to be a lot more powerful. And once again, to show more confidence and be a lot more direct. And another one, you probably heard this maybe since you were even in high school, but using big words you either don't know what they mean or you wouldn't normally use. People might think, oh, using the big words to make you sound more intelligent. If you use that big word in the wrong context, it almost does the opposite effect of that. It's like you're trying to do a little bit too much. So just use the words in the language you would normally use, but then just utilize these graduate level skills, and it's all going to come out smoothly. The writing process takes time. If we had a counter for how many times you said this presentation, it'd be pretty high by now. But writing is so important, and it takes so much time to create that really good writing. The drafting, the restructuring of everything. This isn't that English 101 essay for the book you didn't read that's due the next day. This is going to be stuff you've been working on for a semester, a couple weeks, a couple months, maybe even a whole year or two, formatting and doing all this stuff. So the editing, proofreading is going to be a huge part of your time too. And it's such a shame if you spend so much time writing all this stuff and then to have grammatical errors and stuff take away from the message you're trying to convey. So just really take a considerable amount of time in each of these steps and really make sure everything is foolproof. But at the end of the day, you're accepted into graduate school already. The professors see those skills in you, and you have those skills in yourself, and it's being able to bring those out. So if you got this, you got this.
You got it, and you're here to help. So a couple just quotes that we'll leave up here for a few moments. We won't necessarily read them out loud, but a little writing inspiration. One that I will read is the last one on there, and really the biggest difference between undergrad and graduate level writing is the the goal of progressing. You're not just adjusting and showing that you understand the content, but you're progressing the field of research. So this quote, I believe passionately, is something that still does not exist. We create non-existent, whatever we have not sufficiently decided. So the goal you're going for, the research argument that you're trying to make, it might not exist, but if you recognize that need, that is why we're here. So stay with it, and really that is such a unique and awesome opportunity that we have in graduate school. 100%. So we'll open it up to some questions. If anybody has any questions, welcome to ask, welcome to email us as well, share that contact information. But any questions on that?
Well, we thank you guys for all of your questions.
Definitely a question. And I think the biggest, there are a handful of resources on campus. Really what I've seen work the most is working with your peers. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in a really formal sense. Most of the time that's going to come down to grammar and syntax. Sometimes it's in the structure or the flow, but oftentimes it's grammar and syntax. And so working with your peers, one of my friends moved here from Nigeria the month that school started, first from the United States, and it was like language, etc. And we become really good buddies, and really a large part of that was kind of helping each other. They're sharing new perspectives with me, but they are also able to help with the grammar, with the sentence structure. So, we're all here for similar purposes. Make friends and make those friends, because everyone's here to support you.
Common mistakes I've seen, I guess they all revolve around the idea of not using the resources that they have available to them. People like to rely on technology, whether it's spell check or those, citation generators for you. They're not always accurate. I've had documents that have been, spell check, and I bring it over to Microsoft Word, and there's 5 more things they didn't see, and I read it with my own eyes, and there's 5 more things. So it's always good to just use a bunch of resources around you, whether it be writing coaches like us, your peers are a big one. They're also all at this graduate level too, so they all have that skills and that knowledge that got them here, and so they're going to be a really important resource for you. Professors as well, not being afraid to ask questions. Just learning to use the resources in front of you, I think, is going to be the biggest thing that's going to support you, and the biggest mistakes to use for
Curious about, wondering about, whether it's graduate specific, graduate level, school specific, campus resources, feel free to ask.
So I guess, are you asking for books that are resources more for helping you throughout the graduate level writing stuff? Yeah. Well, I guess in terms of writing, anything from Purdue Owl is going to be really helpful. But as far as what's been really helpful for me, and it's mostly around self-care and mental health, because that's what's so involved in your graduate level career. It's books like The Body Keeps the Score. Just learning about, a lot of self-care routines for yourself and how, you put too much stress on your body's going to feel that, and it's going to remember that. So there's kind of a lot of self-help books in that regard that help me take better care of yourself. Those are the type of resources that are really helpful for me, because it keeps me level-headed in that baseline.
And I think when it comes to writing as well, and there's a lot of very well-published writers that will say, write every day. There's websites or resources like Grammarly, which is a web-based program